Not what I expected.
He makes that modem noise from the mental effort of velcroing on his white sneaks.
As he's drooling.
He didn't say that, Joe. I'm fucking with you. He never said that, Joe. Definitely never said that. So, I mean, the black tie, it's really a tribute to him. And I would have had a black suit. And I used to have a black suit, which would do this bit much better, but I lost it to COVID. It's still in New York somewhere, I think.
Damn.
Yeah, basically, I kept a black jacket. It was custom made when I had it in China. Like, I went to China, I got a bunch of custom suits made, not this one. And I just kept the jacket in an office, just in case to throw on, in case there's a meeting that comes up, one of those. And then COVID hit, we all went home, and I never saw the jacket again. So
what a shame.
I can't do it. So now I got a blue suit, a dark navy blue suit on with a black tie, which is not a good look, but hey,
I mean, you got a pretty dark, lighting scheme set up there.
I mean, he has got a very dark background, just black, and he's wearing a black suit with a white shirt. So he really just looks like a white face and a white shirt floating in just blackness. But his style. Anyway, it's a tribute to one of the best podcasters out there. I was drawn to one of a recent interview that he had, this one with Jin Keyu. And she talks about China's economy, tariffs, trade, communism, capitalism, and all that kind of stuff. And as you know, I spent a long time in China, so it caught my eye.
What are the pros and cons of being an entrepreneur in China versus the West?
In China, the speed is just awe-inspiring. You have a good idea, you implement it, you realize you're dreaming very fast because there's also the support system, right? The infrastructure there, the digital infrastructure there, the engineers are there, the talent is there, and they're cheap. But I would not feel safe. Not because of danger of expropriation or nothing like that, but the bankruptcy laws are not there. You can have a very evil competitor, and evil competitors are there everywhere in China. They would, call the police on you, put you in jail.
Kind of with the calling of the cops, it sounds like those cops are pretty crooked, right? I mean, it sounds like if you can spread rumors and then have somebody else arrested, that's corruption. And just in terms of the legal system not being very effective, I've got a little bit of an anecdote. It's not directly tied to me, but I know when I was living there, the expat community are pretty close. Stories go around, and there was one story that spread about someone taking a cab, and then the taxi got into an accident, and then what they ended up doing, he was in the back, and the cab driver blamed the guy. Like the foreigner, and his life ruined. I mean, nothing you can do about it. I was there for about 4 years, and a big reason why I left was it felt like I was on borrowed time. If I ran into a little bit of bad luck, like if I got into an accident like that or whatever it was, then my life would be ruined. Over. There's no recourse. You don't have really any rights as a foreigner in China. And that was over 10 years ago when I was living there. So, but it sounds like just based off of this interview, maybe not a whole lot has changed.
You have a good idea, you'll be copied. And there's a lot of work. You have to dine and wine with the local governments. I mean, that's not allowed anymore, by the way, but you dine and wine, figuratively speaking, you have to have a very good relationship with them. That's a different kind of work.
Yeah, that's absolutely work. And I know during my time there, the job that she's referring to is basically to get shit-faced drunk with the business partner or local government or whatever it was, because that's when the real you comes out. It's kind of a well-established expectation that some meeting like this, some dinner meeting happens like this, where everyone there gets just completely plastered. I've witnessed this plenty of times. I've only been directly involved a couple times, but I will tell you, it sucks. Joe, as you know, I don't drink anymore for personal reasons. But even like over 10 years ago, I hated getting that drunk. You never want to get that drunk. But it's just part of the business world over there. But like the stories of like you go into like there's a back room, any kind of moderate or good restaurant is going to have a bunch of these separate rooms that are going to fill with like a big circular table that can seat like 8 to 10 people, and you all sit around
Like
and people
family
come and they just
style
fill,
dinner.
yeah, and they just come and they just fill up this Lazy Susan, that big glass rotational thing, and the shots just keep friggin' coming until everyone's totally plastered.
That definitely happens in the U.S. We've got an extreme drinking culture here. It's not a requirement, but it happens all the time. It's like, living in New York, there's an insane drinking culture here. It's just, especially if you want to like really get in with someone, everyone knows, go get a couple drinks. It's really smooth sober, especially, kind of stodgy, like working relationships. Yeah, exactly.
A couple. It's a casual. I don't. The emphasis isn't on you. Like your friends need to carry you out of those like business deals,
right?
I mean, that's kind of the point I'm trying to make. It's just taken to such an extreme.
That it's
there.
Like the
idea is every shot
requirement.
The amount is, yeah, and it's just like every shot is supposedly just like another layer of the mask that we wear taken off until you finally see who it is. That's kind of how I was told, and it was explained to me, and it sucks. It sucks. I really didn't like it.
Since we're talking about it, there was a lot of controversy around Jack Ma disappearing, quote unquote, and reappearing a bit later. And there's been sort of rumors of some tense relationships that he has with the Chinese government. What is important to understand about the whole situation?
In the U.S., capital controls politics, one could argue. In China, it has to be the other way around. Capital must be reined in by politics.
That's a good line.
Yeah,
not gonna lie.
Absolutely.
That kind of that rang true.
As part of the capitalist class, do not have the ambition to exceed the powers of the political class. Is really at the core of it, I'd say. There are important details that I think the West has not fully provided to the public.
Did you hear that, Joe? Joe, were you as insulted as I was when you heard that? Joe, tell me that's not a challenge. Details?
Yeah.
That's what we do. That's what we do in this podcast. It's all details. And she's saying the West didn't do this? Well, I am the West. Like,
that's
who's
right.
the West? What does that even mean?
It's right
so
here.
Funny. They make these like kind of someone might refer to the West doesn't do X, Y, and Z, and it's just a meaningless statement. I am the West, and we do details. Okay. So aren't you dying to know what she's about to say?
Yeah.
What details did we not provide? 金客语.
For instance, and financial, as innovative as it was doing banking jobs without being regulated like a bank, right? So that obviously poses a host of financial stability questions and rules and regulations and so forth. So the fact that IPO was halted, you could say that there were strong economic regulatory grounds for that.
Yeah, you could say, Joe. She didn't just say that.
This is in the context of Jack Ma disappearing.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. So Ant Financial, that's one of his businesses.
Yeah. Which he said there are details that the West did not provide.
Yes. So what she's implying, So what she's implying is that the story. So like the kind of that overlay that was given by Lex Fridman when introducing this, I don't think she sees that. I mean, that's something that they put in afterwards in the editing, and in that it says like he made a speech. It went like this: he made a speech. The powers that be didn't like it and then ceased the IPO. That I guess is the story in the West. And she comes around and says, you know what?
The IPO in the US.
No, I think it was in Shanghai or Hong Kong.
Okay.
I think that's where the IPO was. And the story that she's kind of trying to add in a little more color to is, the West doesn't fully understand the details to this because Jack Ma's bank or Jack Ma's fintech was operating like a bank, but it wasn't being properly regulated. Those were the details, I guess, that the narrative in the West had left out.
Oh, okay. All right. I understand.
Joe, this is what we're going to dig into today. So just by way of the timeline, in October 24th, 2020, Jack Ma gives a speech. And this is what Lex was referring to. Now, a little over a week later, so this was November 2nd, Ant Financial was summoned for a meeting, and the regulators published a proposed new rule. And then the very next day, Ant Financial said that the IPO was suspended. And they said the IPO was suspended because, the company, quote, I'll read here, may not meet listing qualifications or disclosure requirements due to material matters related to the regulatory interview of our ultimate controller.
Government didn't like it.
Yeah. So the first question is, what was in that regulation? I'm not going to lie. I don't think I could possibly find it, but I did. All right, Joe. All right. So here is the draft regulation. The China Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission and the People's Bank of China. So this was published, like I said, November 2nd, 2020. This was a little more than a week after Jack Ma's speech. I left a few comments in here. We're just going to kind of blow through this because who wants to spend a whole lot of time reading regulations? So the first thing that I want to draw the attention to, the basic definition under these general provisions. If you read it, this really perfectly describes Ant Financial's business model, certainly at the time. So they had something at the time called My Bank, which uses a 3-1-0 business model. So they said it would take 3 minutes to apply, 1 second to approve with 0 human involvement. And what it did for the credit underwriting portion is that it used analytics of its payment platforms. So this is Alipay, the e-commerce platforms, so Alibaba's Taobao, and other big data analytics to assess the credit risk of like an individual. Now, Ant Financial was an intermediary. So it sort of linked up the final lender. So they partnered with a bunch of banks with the borrower. And the borrower could be like a small business or a customer. So think of it more like a broker, like a credit broker. Like it would pair, supply and demand, and it would bring them together. So like Uber for credit, something like that. But the thing is, it did do some credit underwriting, and that was sort of one of the technological, advances that it did was it used big data to try to assess the credit risk, and it could do it very, very quickly. So that's kind of to Jin Keyu's point. But what it didn't do, it did not hold deposits, and it did not hold the loans on its own balance sheet. That's also what a bank would do. But the point here is like you could just read this, and it's just describing his business.
Right. It seems a bit tailored. Yeah, one kind of point when I was reading, I wanted to read through this with an eye of like what would kill his business. One of the things here is the license. I don't know if this is new or not, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here. But now, these kind of things have to be licensed. And as soon as you introduce licensing, you can just, cancel it. You put a lot of power in the hands of the government, whoever's issuing the license, naturally. This one's kind of interesting. It says later that the internet platform that is used by the microfinance companies, must meet the following conditions. And one of it says it has to be in operation for more than 2 years, no record of violations of laws and regulations. This sort of list is pretty long, and that just sounds pretty slippery to me. You're smiling. You show me the company, I'll show you the violation.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's a little slippery, but not a. You'll see later. There are worse ones.
Oh, really?
So one of these things here is they started, I think, introducing requirements of these microlenders that I think would break the business model of that 3-1-0 thing. One of them has to do with, you need to, if there's any question, and almost certainly this is part of like the 3 minutes it takes to fill out the application, is that they're going to have to put in their average, annual income over the last 3 years. Current, underwriting, or really prudent underwriting would require to have some sort of evidence of that. So like if you wanted to apply for a mortgage, you often have to like show your W-2. You need to like verify this stuff. I suspect that their business model, if it only took a second, they're not verifying any of this. Possible. I don't know. Maybe more critically though, down here is that the microfinance company needs to clearly agree with borrowers on the purpose of the loan and monitor the use of the loan. Okay, they're not doing that. I guarantee you. And just the amount of overhead necessary to do that would probably break the business model. So I think this section. I think is a rough one. That the managers over there were like, I don't know. I don't think they're doing this.
How different would that be from using all of those analytics to approve the loan in the first place? Wouldn't it be the same data downstream after the loan's given?
Maybe.
Use of the funds from that person.
Yeah, monitor the use of the loan in accordance with the contract. Maybe there's like an automated approach that could do it. Either way, I think you'll agree that there's a lot of.
Well, I mean, the 310, like it's
310 plus.
Just have like the reverse of that.
Plea 10 365.
Yeah, 310 infinite.
Yeah, 310 infinity. And then they also say that the loan cannot be used for other purposes prohibited by laws and regulations. I mean, one of the things that they do in the United States is they effectively used the BSA AML laws. They use the banks almost as like an extension of sort of the Treasury Department in terms of, executing sanctions, for example, because now the banks themselves are they're putting brains and people into actively searching through this stuff. Like that's something a bank is expected to do. And if they say that this microfinance company also has to monitor the use of a loan and make sure that it's not used for illegal purposes, that's a huge overhead. I mean, especially if the loans aren't even on their balance sheet. That's a whole new
business function.
Yeah.
And there's no revenue from that, right?
No, it's all cost. Same thing with the banks here today. Like, BSA AML stuff. It's not something you'd sell to your client. It's not like, hey, we're going to ask you all these questions up front and KYC, and you're going to really like it. It's not a selling point.
You're going to hate it just as much as we do.
Right. If the other ones kind of killed it, I think this one really killed it. So this one right here, it says, where a company primarily acts as a funding provider and collaborates with an institution to conduct loan business, it shall not outsource core operations such as credit review and risk control. So I think what you'll see over the next couple items is what they're doing is they are kind of blurring the line between a bank and a microfinance company. They're pushing those two things together into a bank, and like a bank is going to be regulated. So a company primarily acting as a funding provider, that's a bank. That's where you get your funds. And then collaborating with an institution, what they're saying is that funding provider needs to do its own underwriting. It needs to do its own credit analysis, which is what the fintech did. So the fintech does the credit and the bank does the funding. And now they're saying those have to be pushed together. So the next one is perhaps even worse. And this is often kind of what, in sort of researching this is what usually gets to the headlines. It's this item. In a single joint loan, the investment ratio of the microfinance company operating online shall not be less than 30%. So that's interpreted to mean that the microfinance company, so like my bank or Ant Financial, has to fund 30% of the loan and like presumably keep it on its own balance sheet. So now you really are like a bank. So like this regulation is kind of turning Ant Financial into a bank. Whereas before it just, here, look, buyer, seller, you guys get together and do your thing. I'm out. It's like, I'm not funding any of this loan myself. And that's typically seen as the killing stroke. So back to Jin Keyu's point, when they said that, they were doing banking stuff, but not being regulated like a bank, and that they, my response would be like, well, that's true. They weren't being regulated like a bank because they weren't a bank. And what the regulators did was they forced them to become a bank.
You guys aren't following the rules that we didn't write yet.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's like, look, let's just bring you into this other ecosystem real quick.
Right. We're going to write it. right now.
We're
Here you
gonna,
go.
yeah, here's, you know, surprise.
Because like this happened days later, right?
It-
Like just a few days, you said.
10 days or something. So the speech
Yeah.
was October 24th and then November 2nd. Okay. So, you know, don't say that bureaucracies can't work really fast. They think that Xi Jinping himself like got involved. It was like, draft this up. This isn't super long. So this one is pretty nutso. So if a microfinance company issues online microloans, it shall register the amount, region, borrower, other information of the online microloans issued in the National Online Microfinance Registration System. So they're basically saying all these banks, we're gonna have some centralized registration film with all the loans, and you're gonna update it within 5 days. I don't think Americans would stand for that. There absolutely no way Americans would ever stand for that. And it reminded me a little bit of kind of this other side point, which is they can say that these companies, they're all private companies. But if they're essentially just doing like the government's bidding, then like, what's the difference? Like we have, I think they're playing a little bit to some fallacies, maybe definitional ones, or ambiguity, I think is one that's often played with, in the sense that a private company, the way the US thinks of a private company, is one in which the government can't just come in and start taking stuff out of it, right? In our mind, we have an image of, Apple refusing to give the FBI like certain login data for a phone or something like that. There's a barrier there. And I think the Chinese are using that cognitive fallacy that we have with the word a private company. And so they'll say, like, look at all these private companies we have. The private company, are growing and booming, and this is all great. But if they have these things in there that just say, like, look, you have to give us whatever we ask you from them, then who cares if it's private or not? Then we need to like change the way we even understand the word private. Xiaomi is another example. They're very willing to share information. I just asked, I kind of asked Grok about this briefly or something. And I think, almost 100% of the requests that they get from the government regarding their phones and who's using them and all that stuff is responded to. They collaborate and they cooperate. Xiaomi cooperates with the government. And Jin Keyu also mentioned something like that. So long as you cooperate with the government, it'll be fine.
It's a cultural thing, but just keep your head down, be humble, contribute to society, do philanthropy, collaborate with the government, and you're kind of okay.
But again, we have to understand that private company doesn't mean the same thing as it does in the US. And I think that's a failure of language, our own language.
Yeah, that's why I kind of rolled my eyes at the start. Like one of the first lines from her that you played, she was talking up how amazing it is you can bring your idea to life, how amazingly quickly. It's like only if the idea is sanctioned, only if the idea is approved.
Now to be fair, we didn't show this, although she says it like literally right now, so maybe we'll just play it.
More broadly speaking, if you're an entrepreneur, part of the capitalist class, keep your head down and make money, and that's fine, right? Do some philanthropy. There are also many, many other billionaires that are just fine, that are actually very much in favor of the political leadership, and they do their thing. Now, I'm not saying what's right, what's wrong. It's just a very, very different culture and different country. In the US, it's great to be colorful. I mean, you have a very, very colorful president. He would never have been able to make it in China. You have the likes of Elon Musk. It's great to be different. It's great to stand out. You do not want to stand out in China. So the moral of the story is that saying in China that you just don't want to be the tallest tree, right? The tallest tree gets the most wind.
On what dimensions do you think that the height of the tree is measured?
I don't know what Lex Fridman was thinking just then, but they did cut to him, and we did see his reaction when they mentioned like Elon Musk and Trump. And like, let's see if I can articulate this. But when he comes back and he says, how is the tallest tree measured? When, Musk, is he just spouting off at Twitter? Does that make him the tallest tree? Or is it because he's just the best entrepreneur? and he's the tallest tree because he's the best entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And I think what he's trying to drill down to is you definitely want a Musk in your country. But for her to say that he can't make it there because of his personality is to acknowledge that there's a swath of individuals of a certain personality type, the kind that would spout off and have their own ideas, that simply are not welcome in China. And I think this is sort of one of the themes throughout this, both this episode right here, and then maybe kind of when listening to Lex Fridman interview of Jin Keyu. And it's just that there's a trade-off between power and growth. And the Chinese lately have chosen the power route. But look, I think the other half of this, we looked at the regulation, but now I think we should look at what did he say in that speech, right? Aren't you kind of curious? Like, what could he have possibly said? That was just...
But at the same time, like, my knee jerk is like, it doesn't even have to be that crazy. It could just be something structurally that doesn't fit with a long-term vision.
Okay. Okay. What is your prediction? I mean, that's
I bet it's something like that.
Something like that.
Because Jack Ma's a smart guy. He's put these amazing companies together, by any standard, by any, standard in the US. It's building something like that's just as impressive. So he's not going to come out and just blow up his whole career in some crazy way and say something really out of left field. It's the government, I would imagine, they have this and they starting to touch on this very delicate relationship with the class who has power, that kind of like the entrepreneurship, like the built power versus the more traditional government power. So I would imagine just strategically, if he starts alluding to something that the government doesn't like, I'm not really sure what that would be. But my guess is it doesn't have to be a whole lot.
I know the answer, and I'm going to say I think you're spot on. Let's look at, so I can't show the entire speech, but I need to preface it saying a few things. I found 2 videos on the speech. One, I think, was only stereo, and the sound was only coming in through the right speaker, which is kind of annoying, and it didn't have any subtitles. But then the other one that I found, it had subtitles. It was coming through both ears, but the subtitles did not align with what they were saying in Chinese. It looked like what they did was just took the Chinese speech, translated it into Google, and then just kind of timed it throughout the whole thing. And I just couldn't, I don't want to do that either. It's just, that's too weird to have like the Chinese and the English not match up. But the other thing, and maybe even more important, is I found some mistakes in the English translation. I think what happened was the Chinese wasn't transcribed like perfectly. For whatever reason, they just translated that, and it was a little off. So I sort of struggled with how to do this, because like for those that are just listening, I don't want to just, show 20 seconds of someone speaking Chinese with like subtitles, because you don't know what they're saying. So I'm thinking I'll show a couple clips of him speaking with a couple subtitles that I put in there. And then in general, I'll just quote the English. What do you think? But I think you should get a sense of like who he is.
Yeah.
It's kind of what he sounds like.
像我已经算是退休了，在这个官方非官方的论坛上面，想畅所欲言一下，分享一些非专业人士的专业看法。
very no. Qualified up front.
Well, no, he's like, basically, I'm retired, so I'm just going to go ahead and speak freely. Oh, no.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no. Anyway, the speech sort of went on. He wanted to make three points. The first one was recommending to the Chinese audience to stop emulating Europe and the United States. He called them a seniors club. And he said that China was too young. And, because, senior people, old people care about one thing and young people care about something else. And that's how we should approach this. So he said that Europe and the US are focused on systemic financial risk, but China shouldn't care about that yet because it lacks a system altogether. And this got him a laugh. So I'll read you the quote. You think I should do it in like a Chinese accent? The Basel Accord is more like a senior... No.
Yes.
Probably shouldn't.
No. You must now.
No.
I'm not going to let you not do it.
I can't. It's too. Isn't that offensive?
Whatever you're comfortable with.
It's a little offensive. It's more like a senior citizens club addressing the aging of decades-old financial systems. Europe's aging systems are incredibly complex. However, China's problem is precisely the opposite. It's not a systematic financial risk, as China doesn't fundamentally have a financial system. Rather, China faces the risk of a lack of a financial system. Senior officials in the Chinese, Communist Party might not appreciate that one too much. Later on, he said, still under point 1, he said, the way the world is changing this year is fascinating and very fast. Last night in Shanghai, we decided on the pricing of Ant's IPO. This is the largest listing ever priced in the history of the entire human race. And the pricing happened in a place other than New York City. This was unthinkable 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, but miracles happen. I guess not. And I don't mean to be glib. All right. So the second point that he made is that innovation comes at a price, which is risk. And he says we need to take more risks. He made an interesting point. Current regulators do too much management and not enough supervision. So this is kind of an interesting note on the Chinese language. The word for regulation is jianguan, and the character jian means supervision, and the character guan means management. And the point he was trying to make was like that word regulation is like we're doing too much management, implying that you're actively going in there and like changing stuff, and not enough supervision, in which you're sort of standing back and just watching things happen, supervising. I worked in the supervision department of the New York Fed at one point. We didn't call it the management department, right? The financial management department. So, I mean, obviously the ironic thing here is that he criticized regulation. He said they were doing too much regulation. And then 10 days later, he was killed by it. Killed figuratively. His company, his IPO, was kind of another quote I wanted to throw in here. So this is under part 2 that he said. He said, however, for real innovation to happen, no one will show you the way. And someone must shoulder that responsibility because innovation is bound to make mistakes. But the question is not how to not make mistakes, but whether we can perfect and correct them after making those mistakes and persistently innovate. To make risk-free innovation is to stifle innovation. And there is no risk-free innovation in this world. Sometimes managing risk down to zero is the biggest risk. I mean, he sounds just like, a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. The third point that he made in the speech was that finance is credit management. And they wanted to have everyone lose the pawn shop, what he called the quote-unquote pawn shop mentality. And what he means by that is that the banks are required to collateralize everything, never give an unsecured loan, basically. And this is one thing that he says. He says, China's pawn shop mentality is severe, and it also affects many entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs who have collateralized all their assets. The pressure they bear is very high, and when the pressure is high, your action gets deformed. We must transition from the old way of people looking for money, businesses looking for money, to money looking for people, and money looking for good businesses. I thought this probably was one of the best lines, that last one. I think that really perfectly captures sort of maybe a big difference right now between the China and the US. And specifically that reminded me of like the VC, the venture capital ecosystem, just the whole market. But it's a bunch of investors looking for good investments. They're looking for good businesses, as opposed to businesses desperately trying to scramble around and find and to raise capital. All right. So what do you think? I mean, that was pretty bad. There was some criticism in there. I didn't think it was too bad. Let me show you probably what got him into the most heat. So this one is a separate clip.
孩子吃了老年痴呆的病，不光会得老年的病，而且还会出现很多莫名其妙的病。这个巴塞尔协议就是考虑。
I made a comment earlier about, he's a smart guy. He wouldn't just, blow up his spot. That seems like the way to blow up one spot in China, right?
孩子吃了老年痴呆的病，
Not what I
老
expected.
年的病，而且还会出现很多莫名其妙的病。
He makes that modem noise from the mental effort
就是
of
考
velcroing
虑
on his white sneaks.
As he's drooling.
He didn't say that, Joe. I'm fucking with you. He never said that, Joe.
You got
Definitely
me.
never said that. But I was having fun earlier. You think there was anything in there that would be enough to be like, look, Xi Jinping would listen to that and just say, I'm putting my foot down? I mean, I think you called it. Like, there was enough criticism in there that sort of matches with your theory.
Yeah, it's not.
What did he do? He criticized the approach, I guess, that the Chinese government leadership was taking with regards to approaching how to design a financial system, right? Don't emulate Europe and the United States. Ease up on regulation, and then, get rid of all this, what he called pawn shop mentality.
Yeah, he's definitely a bold thinker, and those were a lot of kind of core messages to how one could be running a country like China, and not being a part of the government. I guess you just can't really go there too much. And like, if you do, that's the great crime. It's not written down, but again,
you can't challenge it, even in words. I mean, it's not like, I guess he was a bit eccentric. Maybe he had already been like, you have to assume that he was already warned a few times. Like, maybe he said some other stuff before this, and this was the final straw. It can't just be like, it wasn't just a one and done thing. But I think this sort of politics versus capitalism thing is an interesting case. I mean, Xi, in this decision to kill the IPO directly, if you can imagine IPO supposedly generating wealth, he directly traded economic growth with power, right? By halting that IPO. And how much growth and wealth would have been released by that company if those regulations didn't come in and tamp it down? And that seems to be the trade-off. Centralized power, economic growth. And, it's almost like if you would just let it go, you kind of have it all bundled up in here, all this economic power, and they're sort of trying to hold the reins, keeping it down in there. Who knows what China would have looked like if it would just completely free and open market, let it go wild. They're calling it like a hybrid system, when really maybe it's more better described as kind of this like dome system.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say dome like that. They use the phrase the tallest tree feels the most wind. It's like the phrase I always heard was the tallest blade of grass gets cut first. It's deeply psychological.
They're pruning.
Yeah, pruning. Like, it's deeply psychological in the just Chinese culture to not rise above, to not cause too much noise, to not be too colorful, like she was saying at the start here. And with that comes a lot of power. Not for everyone, many people take big risks, and most are not successful. That's just the way she goes. But for those that do, in some, take on such extreme risks and come out on top, someone like Elon Musk, he came from nothing, and he's the world's richest man now. Like, he just has enormous power, even in the U.S. and internationally as well. And so, that's just not something that's tolerated.
That's a serious problem. She didn't really. I don't think she really presented it this way. She sort of would hedge something like saying, I'm not criticizing the Chinese approach necessarily, but to say that somebody like Elon Musk couldn't make it in China, that's a problem. I think that's a huge problem.
Yes, she seems super biased.
You got that sense naturally. Too. I got that sense too.
Extremely. It's like the last phrase that we heard from her just through watching. She said, "Absolutely, all the incentives are still there."
The story has meant that entrepreneurs don't want to be entrepreneurs anymore. The young kids don't aspire to be people like Jack Ma. That's not true at all. The incentives are still there. It's a different kind of rich elite class in China.
after talking about all the issues with it. It's like, these issues, what incentive do you have left if you're an entrepreneur and you can have everything taken away from you at any given time? What's the incentive? Like, and then her initial comment was, it's this amazing entrepreneurial environment because there's all these resources around, which is true, but I don't think you can mobilize them unless it's in a way that works well with the government, and you have to constantly play towards that. So I don't know. It all felt very flimsy to me.
Yeah, I would be interested to read her book, but that would definitely be a much more, it's going to be kind of hard in an interview to really articulate yourself very well. So you can give her the benefit of the doubt. You got to really, you criticize something that she wrote.
Yeah.
But I had the same sense. I didn't really like her from the first few sentences that she said. Maybe we can kind of play a clip in here or something just to reference it. But I found that there was some straw manning going on. What was like the biggest misconception that the West has about people in China or something.
Yeah, she had a very kind of like finger wagging tone, kind of self-satisfied.
Well, that's, I think, to be expected from experts, and particularly those that are trained at Harvard. She definitely played that role very well. I mean, she looked exactly how an expert should. Just kind of the hands under the table, just like, well, everything's so obvious. I've put so much thought into it, and that's just kind of how it is. One could say that, one could make that argument, but we really have to kind of consider all of the different possibilities. And it's just, I can't stand it, frankly. I didn't find her particularly impressive. But I don't know. I mean, she's more successful than I am. So what can I say? There was a lot of stuff. I wish other topics that we didn't talk about. She talked about the failure of 0 to 1 in China and the inability for China to do breakthroughs. So she did acknowledge that. I mean, they definitely, to her credit, she definitely said a lot of things that were very critical of China, although maybe didn't weigh them perhaps as much as you or I would. She talked about the desire for a sure thing in China, which means copying stuff. So she acknowledged that the IP laws are very weak, that if Chinese see a good example, they're just going to all flock to it and just kind of just build it out as fast as possible. I think that's sort of what she was alluding to with the competition being there. And then, maybe most importantly, she talked about the one-child policy, and she had a couple theories. I listened to the part, to the chapter about why people aren't having kids anymore. That's also a much broader developed world problem in general. But when I listened to her, I thought she was way wrong on a lot of things. I put a lot of thought into this as to why people aren't having kids. But we're kind of out of time at this one. Maybe I'll try to find some other way. And it's obviously, kids is not something that we really cover on this podcast, but it is something I've got a lot of passion about. So maybe I'll sort of find a way just to wedge it in somewhere else, because I do have some thoughts, and I think the current conversation is wrong, and maybe I could try to add to it, but not now, not today.
Excited to hear that, though.
Yeah, that's all I had for you, Joe. Anyway, she said we don't go into the details, but that's exactly what we do right here in the Root of All Evil podcast. I'm Luke.
I'm Joe.
And we'll see you next week.
See you then.
Bye.
Just a little filthy lucre buys a lot of things, and I could take you to places that you would like to go.